All right, in this last demo for Project 3, we're going to talk about using the pen tool, sometimes called the path tool, but we will call it the pen tool because that's what Illustrator calls it. And you'll find that tool right here, all right? And this tool here is essentially, it's kind of a weird tool. It allows you to make shapes, and the shapes can be just about any size. So for starters, we're just going to play around with making shapes. So we'll look at plane, and in plane 1, we are going to use the path tool, and we're going to create a plane of geometric nature. Each plane, you'll have only one plane per composition. And keep the shapes relatively simple and don't cross the path. So what do I mean about crossing the path for starters? When you're drawing with the pen tool, you basically click, 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 and click. Now, you'll recall from our last exercise that whatever weight and size you just set your properties for your shapes are, that's what it remembers. Okay, so the last time I was doing it, it was, a 16 pixel line and there was no fill. Well, in this case here, we're going back to what we were doing in the first point, and we are not going to be dealing with strokes. We are dealing only with fills. So this is fill and this is stroke. Okay, so stroke, we're going to turn the stroke off. Oh, it disappeared. No, it didn't go away. Sorry. We click on our fill tool, double click on it, and then pick a black color. Say okay. Ooh, I did something wrong there. Click a black color. Okay. And so now my shape is filled with black. Okay. So this is a plane, right? A plane is a relatively large element in relationship to the format. So we talked about points being relatively small, planes being relatively large. So what happens, right? So let's take a look at this, okay? We would consider that a point. It's small in relationship to the overall format. As it starts to get bigger, when does it become a plane? Is it still a point? Yeah, it's still a point. It's still a point. Getting marginal, right? Now it's sort of like, well, how big is that really? My feeling is that when it reaches about 20% of the format size, which is about where we're at now, it becomes a plane. It's a little bit of an arbitrary call, but you got to make the call somewhere. So this would be the smallest plane you would want to create. Okay, you can certainly make it larger. Notice I'm just dragging the corners, and I can distort the shape. I can make it wider. I can make it narrower, right? So I can undo all of that by the corners, click it in the middle, and I can move it around, okay? So this would be considered a plane of a geometric nature, which is what we're trying to do in plane 1, all right? So we could even say, okay, well, I'm good with that. I'm going to just go File, Save As. I'm going to go to my Project 2 folder and go to my Planes folder, and I'm going to just save this as Plane 1. Plane 1-1, okay? So save that little puppy, say okay to that. And then I'm going to delete that dude and I'm going to make another one. Okay, so now let's talk about crossing the path. Okay, so notice as I click and I click and I click and I click. Now these are vectors, and so the program doesn't know what to do except to follow the points. So if I click over here, oops, now I've got 2 shapes. If I click over here, I've got 3. Now I got 7, right? And so by doing this, you end up basically crossing your paths, and it can get really ugly as you start to do that. I don't even remember where I started now, somewhere in here. You could just, if you want to be done, you can just click the pen tool and it will finish it up. Maybe that's the end point. I think it is. Anyway, this ends up not being a plane, right? When we look at it, it's really a bunch of small points. And so it doesn't count as a plane. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and select that with my selector tool and delete the whole deal. And bingo, she's all gone. All right, so geometric. And when you want to finish it, you just go to the end, the beginning point, and click, and it finishes it off for you. All right. Now, play around with bleeding things off the edge. Now in Illustrator, you'll see it as it bleeds off the edge. And when we save this, this is important because Illustrator sees everything. It doesn't just see what's in the format. So if we were to bleed this off and just save it as, we would end up with weird. We're going to be pausing here in a minute here. Gotta figure out what the hell's going on. Why doesn't my artboard? Oh, right. Weird. Maybe we use SVG. Let's try that. Let me pause this for a moment. Okay, so, sorry, I had to jump out there for a minute because I needed to check something. So I'm back, and so Illustrator will remember all this stuff, okay? So it's okay for now. We'll talk about saving artboards later, but if something bleeds off the edge, Illustrator sees it, but we're not going to worry about that right now, okay? What it will do, we'll just go for Save As, and we will save this as plane 1.2, and we'll hit Save. I was just making a test, so we'll just hit Replace on that, and we'll say okay to that, and then you're done with that, okay? So that's organic planes, all right? I mean, geometric planes. So let's get rid of that, and let's draw some organic planes. In plane 2, use the Path tool, create a plane of an organic nature. So what's organic exactly? Well, organic is not geometric. Now, technically, when we draw with the pen tool, it's still a mathematical tool. It basically creates rounded shapes. And by doing this, what I'm doing is I'm clicking and dragging, and hello, there we go, finishing that off. Okay, so this would be organic, okay? And basically, even though it's rounded and it looks like, like a cobble on the beach or something like that, it still is technically mathematical, but for our purposes, we're going to call this organic, all right? So geometric, pen tool, geometric, organic. Okay, so how do we draw that organic shape? So let me delete that, and let me delete this, and let's talk about how that tool works. This tool is cool. It's called a Bezier tool, technically, and Bezier, and that's spelled B-E-Z, B-E-Z-I-E-R, Bezier. It's a French word, and it means curve. And so essentially what happens is that it uses an algorithm to figure out, sorry, wrong tool, to figure out what the curve is going to be between two given points. So if I start with my pen tool and I click, I make a point and I get this little handle, right? And we've seen how that works. If I click again, And then I hold the cursor down and I drag. I get these handles. And these handles dictate the arc of that curve. This is the Bezier aspect of it, okay? So now I get a little rubber band, right? So it's going to show me where I'm going to go next. Okay, so if I click on that and drag again, I can then distort that angle, okay? Same thing, I get the little rubber band. Where do I want to go now? Well, maybe I'll do that, right? Now the line's crossed, right? But I can fix that by just simply doing this. Now it's not crossed anymore. And then I'll click over here, and then I'll click over here. And then when I want to finish, notice when I get to that beginning point, the little cursor turns into a little hollow white thing. I click on that, bingo, my shape's done. All right, so if I wanted to adjust this, I can use my direct selection tool, okay? And so if I click on any point, I'll get the handles, and I can pull the handle, I can push the handle, I can twist the handle. So it's a very powerful tool, but it takes some practice to get good at. So I'm not going to worry about, figuring out how to make like the letter S or something, okay? We're going to not get there right now. This is just a matter of playing around with this tool. Most people, this tool flips them out. It's difficult to control. I'll make no apologies for that. It's definitely one of the more advanced tools to get good at. But for now, all we want to do is that. So we're good with this, right? I'm copacetic with that as a plane. We'll go File, Save As, and this is now plane 2, right? Plane 2, organic, right? So this is now plane 2-1, right? So, but plane 2-1. And in this case here, you're probably not going to want to work incrementally unless you want to scale it and rotate it and do some kinds of cool things, which you can do, right? If we click on this and we use our transform palette, we can select the transform tool, and that's over here, transform, and we can then rotate, we can scale, we can rotate some more. Notice the cursor changes based on what it's going to do. Move, rotate, scale. Okay. So if you want to move it, maybe play around with the bleed or something like that, feel free to do that. And then you can save that again, or you can make a brand new shape, whatever you want to do. Okay. So let's just say we're done with plane 2, and now we got to go to plane 3. This is the inner relationship of forms, and you're going to use at least 2 forms must be used, at least 2, right? 2, got them 2. Geometric or organic or mixed. Concepts to explore include detachment, touching, overlap, penetration, union, subtraction, intersection. So what are those exactly? Essentially, when 2 things interact, and I'm going to now draw another geometric shape. All right, so now, when 2 elements are close in proximity, they are detached, right? So you might save this as, File, Save As, and this is now plane 3-1, right? Plane 3-1. Okay. Now, when 2 shapes touch, they're now touching, right? This creates a tension point, often effective as a focal point. File, Save As, plane 3-2, okay? If they overlap, and again, you can experiment with how these things overlap. What do these shapes do when they overlap? So explore the way the interaction of the perimeters look. There's a lot of fun things you can do, like create little white spots or, so explore that. File, Save As, and again, rotate, scale, have some fun with it. Don't necessarily just stick with what your first, solution that comes to mind, okay? Now, this is where our Pathfinder tools come into place. So let's see, where's my Pathfinder? I think it got buried. It did. So let me get my Pathfinder back out. Here's my Pathfinder, and so here are the different tools, right? Here we have divide we have trim, we have merge, we have crop, we have outline, and we have minus the back. And these are our main ones, right? Exclude, intersect, minus the front, and unite. So unite basically just makes one shape out of two, so don't worry too much about that. It'll just create, you know, one shape, and so we won't get a chance to play around with this any further. So in order for these modes to work, an element in front needs to be, we have to select both of these things, and then we click, right? And so this is minus the front, so whatever was there, that's gone, right? If I send this element to the back, this is arranging now, and this is something else. So I say I wanted this to be to the back, I can right click on it and I can say arrange, send to back. Now that element is behind. So if I select both of these and I say the same thing, exactly the opposite happens, right? So play around with that. And then, so this would be sort of like penetration, right? These are the terms that are used, and these are the tools, so they're not exactly the same. But the goal here is to sort of play around and see what these tools do. In this case here, this would be an intersection, okay? Because these two elements, when they intersect, this is what's left. You're going to end up sometimes with things that look like points. That's fine. The goal is to sort of play around with these tools and see what happens, okay? Undo that, and then we can see there's like making a hole in a donut, right? And this is something that's kind of fun too, where you can undo this for a moment and you can move this little dude up here in front and make this dude bigger and bigger yet. And then if I select all and then I use that tool, I get a big hole in the middle of it, right? So it's kind of fun. All right, so undo that. So the goal here is just to play around with these different things, you know, penetration, subtraction. This was a subtraction, right? I'm taking something out of the middle, I'm subtracting it. The intersection was when two elements actually overlapped, okay? So, actually, I'm sorry. Let's grab this guy here. Oh, wrong guy. Wrong guy. Let's grab him. Okay, I'll move him out. And then try that. Let's try the intersection, which is, that's what's left. Let's try this one now. And again, it depends on what element's on top. And so if I bring this guy back to the top, arrange, bring to front, I'll get a different result, right? So play around with the overlap and play around with the different tools and just explore it, okay? That's the whole idea here. So have some fun. And that's it for Project 2.